That's okay. I mean, do you want to start over or are you okay?
Oh, are we starting now?
We started like 20 minutes ago. No,
Are we
I'm
live?
kidding. No, no, no.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's start over.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I'm here. Hi.
Hello.
How are you, UX Matto?
Yeah, I need like a UX Matto, a PM Matto, a writer Matto,
Seriously.
because I contain multitudes like all other humans. Uh,
And
but
author Matto, I have your book on my coffee table. It's such a lovely thing, and I really haven't
what?
adequately thanked you for that gift. It's so sweet.
Oh, I hope you liked it.
Yeah. Do you talk about it on the show? Like, what are you, do we talk about the full Matto or do we stick with the UX part of you? Which I'm sure isn't tied to any
I
of
mean, it's a great way to this week's sponsor,
that.
me.
Yeah.
No, um, no, I there's no limitations here. We like I've said before. It's like my perspective on this is first and foremost, this is a conversation between people that just happens to be recorded. So wherever that conversation goes is the correct place for it to go. I find that I enjoy the ones more where we just start talking about shit. And I mean stuff. Please curse if you want to. Um, yeah, so it's kind of wherever we want to take things is, like I said, it's the right way to go.
Sounds good
Um,
to me.
but I figured, part of the reason I pinged you is that I off and on for the past 17 years we've been trying to meet up, and I mean, it hasn't really been 17 years, but it's
It
been a
feels like
while.
it.
Yeah, and I figured that this was a way to at least make that happen, so we don't actually have to leave our home,
Yeah.
uh, cross a river, do anything like that.
Yeah. Wait, we're on the same side of the river.
Oh, we
You're
are
over
on the
here.
same side of the river. That's
I
right.
think we're in the
Yeah.
same neighborhood. I'm in Buckman.
I don't know where that is.
Are you
That's
serious?
southeast, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that
we're in inner southeast. We had
I'm in
coffee.
northeast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Same diff. Same diff.
yeah, yeah.
Not really.
Oh, now I know where Buckman is. I don't often remember the names of the neighborhoods. I know mine, but yeah, I get
Well, good.
lost in
I
Portland
know
still.
yours too. I'm standing right outside the door. Ready?
Whoever's out there didn't see the no soliciting sign. Anyway, um,
By the way, I got my handy on air sign to share.
oh,
Okay,
that's
reversed.
for me, it's
Rayno.
correct.
Rayno. Oh, it is? Okay, good.
Yeah,
But you can't see it behind me, so you'll just have to imagine it.
that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're pretty fancy over there.
I'm fancy. I have like a whole podcasting studio because I also do a radio show sometimes for KMHD, a jazz show. So I've got records and I even have a
Hmm.
reel to reel recorder over here.
Oh, I thought this was being recorded reel to reel.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Make the analog version
yeah.
of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, back in the day, I've cut tape for
Oh, me
radio.
too.
Yeah,
Oh,
way back in the day.
I don't think we're too far apart, my friend.
Yeah,
I used to
I,
have a
I,
job at a movie theater threading the actual
mhm.
film through. And do you remember how complicated that was?
I never did that. I had a friend who worked at the cinema that was near our house, and I watched her do it. But I worked at the local NPR station,
Oh,
right
cool.
right as I not worked, but I volunteered right as I was getting out of high school, and so like I had to take the news stories that ran the night before and cut them down to smaller bites for the morning recap.
Oh my gosh. So you're like writing down time signatures.
Hmm. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Cool.
and as I was leaving, they were just starting to get into digital audio tape, and I was just like, I don't understand this newfangled technology. I'm out of here, which is how I feel with AI right now. But it's
Uh,
just always the same thing.
It's funny because I've always been simultaneously a Luddite and totally obsessed with a chapter beyond, something in advance of nowhere
Yeah.
for my
Yeah.
entire life. So I, have sat on AI innovation teams in enterprise for the past 7 or 8 years. But at the same time, I am very decisive about when I use it in my work and personal lives as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of when I was in grad school for my PhD, which is a dual PhD in anthropology and media and cultural studies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out, I'd just gotten back from 2.5 years of fieldwork in Senegal, witnessing how young people there use Silicon Valley created technologies in what I call off-label ways. So lots of digital makers and users and people who should be recognized as engineers and designers. I got back and I was out in the countryside. I went to UNC in Duke, so I was with some professors from there. We were driving out in the countryside together in a car and looking at these beautiful artworks done by a series of graffiti artists from New York who had come down to paint the rural tobacco sheds with
Mm-hmm.
really cool graffiti. They were called the Barn Burners, and it was a sponsored project. So we were out there looking at these gorgeous things way out in the middle of the forest in the countryside. And we realized that of all 5 of us in the car, this is 2011, none of us had GPS.
Mm-hmm.
All of us had outdated, non-smartphones because we all simultaneously were doing cutting edge research on technology and found ourselves like really critical and careful about how we used it in our lives and came to depend on it at the same time. And it ended up getting us really lost. But we had a great time. We ended up stopping at a country store and getting some barbecue. So let that be a lesson to all of you.
That's right. Just think if you had a smartphone, you might not have found good barbecue.
That's right. And if you use AI, you might not find your next good taco stand.
That's correct. I mean, that's actually one of AI's biggest weaknesses is tacos.
I bet. Well, eating them but
I mean, the moment it can eat them, we are screwed.
We're screwed.
But,
yeah. Or makes it so that we can't afford to buy our own, or make our own, or makes us forget how to make them, or takes but those are 2 things that I've always said. And I worked in the AI division of AWS for a couple of years as the leading UX researcher in that space, along with my former colleague Liz Jernigan. And we were the first human-facing researchers trying to understand what it was like for users to engage with the cloud through AI for the first time and big data. It was fascinating to watch. So I gave some talks there about sort of what distinguishes us as human from what machines can do. And it was those 2 things that I think would weigh in on a good taco assessment strategy, which is, first of all, any sort of embodied experience is going to be stripped down into the verbal, the like AI doesn't understand how hormones affects its cognition, right? Its neural networks. It doesn't pick up on the discomforts of gastronomy in the process of talking with other people or engaging with other people. It doesn't get the joy of tasting a new food for the first time or in a new way, or the context of thinking through, what music is on and what your longstanding relationship is to the friends that you're sitting with. And yes, there are different ways that it can process all of those things, but its last frontier is really going to be really understanding that contextual, embodied engagement with the world around us, because we as humans have been studying this for 50,000 years. Mm-hmm. And can barely describe it ourselves. And we keep reinventing the wheel and trying to make sense of the difference between the verbal and the nonverbal, the linguistic, the quantitative, and the experiential. So it can't do that. And then it's also bad at critical thinking. So I think it would have a really hard time making reliable recommendations comparing one taco to another.
Mm-hmm. And being grateful for the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, it would be like the Spotify of taco assessment.
Yeah.
It's
Yet
there.
another yet
The
another
tacos are so
technology that I don't use is
good. Me
Spotify.
neither.
Yeah.
Me neither. I do use digital music. I use Apple Music. I've always avoided Spotify for reasons we don't need to get into today. But I go Spotify. It's not for me. But as you can see behind me, I have 3,000 records here
Yeah.
and a couple of record players. So I still am one of those.
You've chosen your side. I understand.
I have no choice. I
Yeah.
worked in record stores for years. While you were cutting up analog tape in the NPR newsroom, I was behind the counter at Amoeba in San Francisco and other all vinyl stores in that region and DJing while I was working as a music critic and journalist back in the late 90s, early aughts in the Bay Area.
I worked at a place called Robert Joe's in Anchorage, which was a music store, and that was probably 94, 93, something. No, maybe 94, 95. CDs had been out for a while, but it was interesting to see a real divide in the clientele over what media they wanted to listen to their music or their media with. Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's always been like, especially when I got quote unquote into UX, like for a long time, I was always an early adopter to things. Mm-hmm. And the further along my UX career I got, the less I really started caring, because I just had too many experiences of adopting early and realizing it's shit, and then seeing most of it fall to the wayside because it was terrible. I mean, I hear now over and over that people are this comment of, if you don't get on top of AI now and your understanding of it, you're going to be left behind. And I think it's possible for a lot of aspects of life, but I feel like I hear that about everything that's a new technology, and like, this is going to replace the thing that you want replaced, and it never really does. I don't know. I think my biggest beef toward the AI stuff is really the AI hypesters who just think it's just so great for everything, and it's really good at very specific things that mostly I don't need help with. Because like, the application areas where I think it makes a lot of sense, figuring out, hey, is that spot cancer? Not something I'm doing in my daily life. So just, mostly what I'm experiencing with it is this rush to implement an AI solution with no regard for what that means for anybody.
Yeah. I think I talked about this when I was at AWS as well, and then on a couple other AI incubators and enterprise, which is that, if you are removing toil from someone's workflow, there has to be an equal measure, can't see my hands, an equal measure of trust there. If you remove a segment of a workflow that has been governed by humans for some time, there has to be a one-for-one measure of, it can come in the form of explainability for the algorithms. It can come in the form of transparency around the outcomes or the agentic decision-making process. It can come in the form of governability for non-technical folks who may be governing or using it. That is what responsible AI really is. And that our role as those of us who are design thinkers and holistic critical thinkers and embodied thinkers is to find ways for that technology to open itself up to that kind of human critical thinking and engagement and governance. And I think that's when I'm more likely to adopt the tools, is after those steps have been sort of put into place. That usually involves other people using it first and seeing how it works out. But it
Yeah.
could be done by product teams themselves, so that the tooling is put out into the world with a lot of that critical thinking and empathy and, structural thinking baked in, and which is what I do, which is what I'm doing for startups. I'm working with 7 startups right now, advising them in product market fit. And 5 of them are AI startups. And my role is to help them think through, what does this really look like in an end-to-end workflow in which it's integrated with a tooling ecosystem, a people ecosystem, and a complex job to be done, not a single function. It always extends before and after the main gist of what it does, to become integrated or part of, an ecosystem or a workflow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think those of us in the UX field can really tell when someone's thought about that and looked into that and
Yeah.
done that sort of discovery, and when they haven't bothered.
Yeah. I think the one thing that always, I would say pretty much across the board, feels like an afterthought is the governance piece.
Mm-hmm.
We'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I understand there are different contexts, but like, and you don't have to out them per se, but like the startups that you're working with, what do you find the ratio of the ones who are looking for a quick out of an exit versus building something that they want to see exist long term?
They're self-selecting. It's not a representative pool. They're people who are hiring me, and I'm going
Yeah.
around talking like this, and they're going, that's exactly what we want. It's such an unusual service that I offer with Maaxa Labs. So when I do my talk, it really depends on them seeing me talk and engaging with me, so they can go, oh, I didn't think of things that way. So all of them are really thinking critically about these things and willing to like commit to putting process to that and to doing that kind of discovery. And I'm seeing us raise the bar and make it so much more likely that they're going to succeed, whether they're trying to, aiming for acquisition, aiming for investment, or trying to keep it independent. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I'm lucky, but also I don't know if founders who weren't interested in those things would want
Right.
to work with me anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, I could raise the bar for them too, but I'm priced in such a way that I get to choose to work with founders who are motivated by something more exciting, something bigger, something more imaginative.
Mm-hmm.
The sacrifice I make for that is that I don't get paid as much for my time as I would be if I were working in enterprise. And
Yeah.
it gets real hectic.
Yeah.
And it's the funnest work I've ever done. I love it. So, I'll figure it
Yeah.
out. I'm figuring out some ways to build cohorts and to sort of, bring down the time overhead involved. But yeah, seeing what people are coming up with when they're passionate about the end user experience or the actual market opportunity or solving problems that no one else has thought to solve. It makes my heart very happy. And at the same time, I do take contracts from major enterprises too. So I'm doing some discovery on an AI tool for one of those very
Mm-hmm.
soon. So it's kind of cool to see side by side who's doing what, and to take that access to UX that enterprise has traditionally had and sometimes squandered, and to put it into the hands with
Sometimes.
low overhead of founders who care, who actually will
Mm-hmm.
act on it.
Yeah. It's much more fun, rewarding, to put your time behind these efforts that are meaningful to you as well. When I started my own thing in 2016, part of the motivation behind that was really wanting to work on things that had an impact on people's lives. It doesn't have to be on the end users. It could be making things better for the people who work at the company. It's like if I had a rough rubric in my head of anything that I didn't have to do, ideally none, but not too much rationalization on whether the work was going to help people live with more dignity or less suffering, those were the things I was interested in. And it was self-selection into a very, very small pool, especially for tech by and large, finding people who are interested in truly helping people live better lives. So I get that, but at the same time, when you find the people to work with, it's just much, much, much more rewarding, and I feel like I'm not wasting my time.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
living the
good
dream, but
on you for
dreams are
doing it.
complicated.
Yeah,
Dreams are really complicated.
they
And
are.
there are mitigating factors. And if they didn't have the textures of adulting and real life and industry and capitalism, then they wouldn't be worth having. So here we are, making a way out of no way. And
Yeah.
it's been fun. I think for a while, I leaving enterprise, I really floundered about where to place my skills, but I've always been a strategist and I've always worked in incubators. And so, although there were times when my title was UX research, I was really PMing, and I have
Mm-hmm.
my PM training and certification from Cornell, and I have my PMM marketing certification for highly technical software. But I found because of my background, I was often just like, call her a UX researcher. And then it didn't take long before all of a sudden I was pulled onto that innovation team or the skunkworks team or the
Right.
incubator again. And I am just a glutton for punishment because things are so weird in that space. And it sparks, and it almost doesn't matter whether you're doing it for your neighbor who has an idea for a new app for gardening, or for, the latest AI application from one of the Fang or Mang companies.
Mm.
That there's something about the people who were there in the lab. That's where I want to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I
Yeah.
do think,
Well,
yeah, and I think there's potential for those of us who do, most of my life I spent in nonprofits as an anthropology professor. I still am an anthropology professor. I just finished 2 classes in forensic anthropology and biocultural anthropology for Pierce College yesterday. But I'm deeply committed to social justice. I'm very much a part of social change. And at the same time, I think that being involved in industry is part of what we do. And it's part of the ways that we make it better.
mm-hmm.
And so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm personally not against it. I just find I think my brain is so geared toward risk assessment that I'm often cued more into the okay, how is this not going to work? Which is important, but sometimes I find myself getting caught up in it, forgetting of the how will this or how can this work, right?
Um,
And I think both perspectives are needed on pretty much any work effort. I worry that I've self-selected myself into a corner
no.
with as much as I rail on AI. There's a couple of projects that I've done that are involved with that, but um, the the ones that I've been involved in that I care about the most are healthcare related,
Oh, yeah. Wow. Cool.
and the ones that I've cared about the least or been least interested in are we have to have an AI solution, so let's just do this because no one will take us seriously if we don't have an AI solution. And it's
Oh,
just like,
yikes. Yeah, that's no fun.
okay. I mean, I get that. I do get that perspective. Like, we don't want to be seen as being behind on technology, especially as a technology company. But it really is that whole just put something out there and we'll figure it out. Like,
Hmm.
I I have real reservations about giving what little time I have left, not to say it ominously, but just realistically.
You have tons of time left. I feel you do. We're going to have a lot of Matthew left in this world. We've got
Well,
you.
we'll see. We'll see. No, it's but you know, it's in the sense that time is finite, supposedly. But like who do I want to give that time to, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I'm sometimes really hesitant on with working with clients who want to come in, or you know, like right now where I'm at is I'm at a really weird place in my career. Not the only one, but I can only
No,
speak for
you're not.
myself,
Yeah.
where I'm, you know, looking for project work. I'm looking for internal
Same.
work. Like it's
Hmm.
kind of like whatever, people. I don't have a preference other than I want to work on something that matters. And then the whole being old thing thrown on top of that. But I just, some of the opportunities that have been coming up lately, I just, as much as I need income, I can't work on them, you know, because they just don't fit my value system. I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but
Well,
it's,
I think it's really important to keep these conversations in play between friends and people we know are like-minded about what we what we do in the world. There was a time, it must have been about 12 years ago. I was doing a lot of work when I was in academia. I did publish quite a bit, and it was
mm-hmm,
very critical, but also simultaneously excited about the digital future. So I would, 1 month publish a piece on African digital futures, which is one of my areas of concentration, where I did a lot of thought leadership and support through the Intel She Will Connect program, bringing programming skills and equipment to young women in Tanzania, all the way, through my dissertation fieldwork in West Africa, where I was watching young women largely, and young people use digital recording technologies and social media to get resources into their communities. So I was able to be a part of Arab Spring, which is very complicated politically. In Senegal, where I was working, there were very positive outcomes from young people using social media to
mm-hmm,
organize around a potentially threatening political situation. And then that's happened again in a positive way just this year. So I'm seeing all this positive stuff. And then a couple of months later, I get invited to be a part of another colloquia called Selfie Harm, about how social media is extremely harmful, through predatory behavior of people toward tweens on social media. So I see the whole of it. And I think there's something in my perspective as an anthropologist that goes back to fearing not new tools. Like fire was a big one.
mm-hmm.
you know 50,000 years ago,
Yeah,
there we were figuring out how to bring embers in from literally volcanic ash or forest fires and to preserve them. And I was giving this talk to the fintech folks at Technology Association of Oregon at Tau. So thanks Skip Newberry and Dana Lawrence for that invite. I was giving a very short talk about why fintech uh, continues to preserve 74% of its capacity for leveraging AI is not being used. And why is it such a high number there? And I said, my talk was good on you. This is like, and same with healthcare. It's like, take your sweet time, get the tools, start trying the tools out, understand that the tools are not going to start actually creating profit for you for
mm-hmm,
some time, and become slow adopters. Because when humans adopted fire, right, we didn't just like figure out how to get the fire somewhere else and
yeah,
then leverage it. We had to create a whole culture around it, ritual practitioners who understand how the fire is used, specialists, different roles, processes and ritual, putting it out at the end of the night, containing it in a sacred place, right? Taboos around when to use it and not to use it, and a whole bunch of words and vocabularies and ways of moving with it, ways of cooking, gastronomy, composing meals, hunting, everything transforming around it. It takes time. And that's what I'm hearing from my friends, for instance, from AWS, who are now making independent tooling out there, who are starting their own startups, who have very much been in the belly of the beast, saying there's a lot of hype, sit tight and start thinking about things like security. Sit tight and stop getting fascinated with the new toys and start to let it sink in what it would mean to have this be a part of your family life or your memories of a loved one or your workflow. And in a decade, we'll start to see what that really looks like.
Yeah. I think you were explaining that, and I kept thinking about like one of the benefits of fire is that you know immediately if you've been burned by doing something wrong. But with AI, with software in general, you're not going to feel the burn for years if you didn't start well from the beginning. And it's like to your point, like take the time to think about where you want to experiment. And what was it?
Brilliant, Matthew. I had never thought of that dimension of it as I started using that metaphor recently. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's yours. No, I'm just kidding. But who was I talking to? Dang it. I can't remember, and I'm sure someone's going to call me on it. But I was talking with someone recently, and they were explaining they were doing something with a client, and they said at the end of 3 months, they're going to shut it down. And because they're putting internal users on a new system.
Okay.
And at the end of 3 months, or at the start of 3 months, they were going to take, 12 people or so, put them on the new system, and they can only use the new system to get their work done. And at the end of that time, they're just going to shut it down and stop and spend a good month looking at what happened and what they want to do. And I just sat there completely rocked going, what? Who does that? Like everybody should, but who does that? And I feel like that's the model that a lot of these companies should take, where it's a time-boxed experiment with things you're hopeful will happen, but also like when it gets done, you stop and say, we're not committing to launching this widely. We're committed to the experiment and looking at the effects of the experiment, and we'll decide what to do once we've analyzed the effects. I would love to see more of that. Because I think you could still move pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But if you're not setting aside, not just a day, but, a couple weeks to really dig into the data and really understand, like, okay, here's what we see is happening, but we don't understand why. So we need to go find out why.
Well, even before AWS, I was on the AI innovation team at New Relic. And so I've been watching teams adopt AI tooling for a really long time, and sometimes very up close in all of the messy contexts. And I get called in the room. I mean, it's an anthropologist thing, I think. It's just like, she's harmless. Let her watch this chaos. And I am, because I help make better tooling so that they don't have these problems in the future. But I developed this thing called a strategic AI adoption framework that helps to pull all these pieces apart so that it's not just like, are we being successful or not? It's let's assess, like, where are we governing who's building the models? What are the risks inherent in that? And what opportunities does it open up? And I actually use Marshall McLuhan, the media theorist, who many of you are familiar with from Toronto, where it's like, I use his framework, the adoption of any new technology. And he looks at the printing press, I use it to think about fire. He looks at television was really what he was looking at very closely. And of course, the dawn of the internet. And we're at another conjuncture now with AI, and says, look, there's step back. We do this stuff. We humans do gunpowder. Like, we do this stuff. These are the principles that we need to take into account. What does it open up in terms of possibilities for futures, ways of living, reorganizing society, reorganizing communication, reimagining spirituality, even reimagining design or embodied experience or whatever. What does it foreclose? Because that is the analog question that we always forget to ask. We got to open up the value of AI, but we're forgetting what we're foreclosing there is oversight over a part of the workflow, or we're foreclosing like an open-ended problem solving that a human might be capable of, that AI is going to try to execute on probably a binary decision around. I think returning to some of these classic questions about what makes us human, how do humans use tools, how do we communicate, how do we think about ecosystems, that gets into religious thinking and folklore, that those are really essential. But when it comes down to it, building frameworks around it is immensely helpful. So that, right, the person who was running this team you're talking about had the wisdom to say, we need to do some R&D. We're going to try it with a select pool of users. We're going to stop. We're going to assess. We're going to take the empiricism or the data we collect around this seriously before we move on. And I just think when humans are ridiculously dumb and incredibly brilliant at the same time, because I'm sure we did the same when we adopted fire. They might not have known what happened when they left the embers burning in the wrong place as they were moving semi-nomadically. And as you say that about the example of AI, I also think, not only do we not know if we've harmed ourselves with it or our immediate environment with it until later, we might also be pulling a thread that does harm in another part of the world and have no idea, right?
Yeah.
We might be starting a forest fire and not realize it. But I also think that instinct that your friend had, or the person you were talking to, is an instinct a lot of people are having now. And there's a theorist of the anthropology of innovation called Ulf Honnertz, and he's from, I think he's Danish. He's one of the Northern European sort of 70s, 80s thinkers around anthropology of innovation. And he says every innovation needs what is called a cultural swirl. So it needs to be a complex team of thinkers with different ways of approaching problems in order to really harness technology and innovation well. What we've seen is a burst of engineering at the art of the possible. And it would have been great if it was contemporaneous with us sort of humanistic social scientists and spiritualists and artists. But we're here on the other end doing some interesting things.
Yeah, you mentioned television and the printing press, and one of the things that I think is, and I don't have a background in anthropology, so I might be reaching. You can say, Matthew, stop that. But I'll give you some rope, buddy. One of the things about the printing press and television, to a large extent, mostly, is those are all push technologies. And in a lot of ways, AI is a pull technology. And so it's like there's this locus of control with the printing press where it's a thing that exists in a space that requires a specialist to use to then distribute the outcome of that to other people. But I feel like we're getting faster and faster to the point where, someone built an LLM that you can leverage, but it's on the internet and you can just, anybody can use it. And so there's this, you don't have to go to a specific location. You don't necessarily have to become a full specialist. And so it's this I'm not using the right words, but the technology got democratized so much faster, to the point where it's just, if you have internet access, you can do kind of, I mean, there's limitations to them, but you can do kind of whatever you want with them. This is a very half-formed thought, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But, I'm trying to find I'm trying to make some meaning around it from a humanistic perspective, I guess, where, we can look back on the invention of the printing press from our perspective now and understand what an impact it had. And I'm sure there was an understanding of it then to some extent. But I feel like we're in this, maybe I'm having cognitive dissonance, I don't know, I feel like I both understand what the impact is and what the negative impact is and the things we're losing. And then I also don't understand it because it's just so new and it's kind of everywhere and it can do anything. What do you want to do with it? I'm realizing, not even half-formed thought. This is a quarter-formed thought. But these are like the thoughts that are racing through my head as you're explaining it. So
yeah, go.
I'm going to stop because I ran out of steam on that one.
That was so good. No, I think it's great. I mean, okay. First of all, you said I might tell you to stop it, but I actually think you should just we should keep having these dialogues and these conversations to build on that, not as a counterpoint or not to shut down what you're saying.
You can yes and.
It is a yes. It's a true yes and I think most of my yes ands really are, because that's, I don't know, that's the way to learn as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
Is
yes and.
Yeah, it's not to push back on that because it's true. It freaks me out. Don't get me wrong. I'm completely freaked out. But I'm also, maybe I am just a weird optimist. And here's why. I'm taking the long view here. And this is what McLuhan would say about the printing press. And this is the medium is the message piece of what he does, is he says, it's not a push mechanism. The fact of the printing press becomes a system immediately. It becomes a system of distributing knowledge, which is resources, it becomes a material network, a material system that actually dictates what is done within it. And so you might have one person operating or owning the printing press, the Gutenberg Bible, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, there are specialists there who are building the technology, just like AI had at first. I saw those folks. I worked with them in enterprise who were the AI scientists, right? And usually it was a chain of AI scientists and AI devs and others involved in that process, but they were largely engineers, mathy people, thinking about things in that way, right? Who have been studying algorithms for a very long time. Before it was called AI. And our team is all about ML at AWS. And I always like to think about the continuity. The idea of AI as a concept predates the nuts and bolts use of ML that is still at the core of much of what happens in the AI ML world. But now we're talking about AI because we're back in this sort of science fiction-y space or way of imagining it. But my point is to say, when the printing press spun out, people could have printed whatever they could afford to have printed. And if you'll remember, the Gutenberg printing press was where the Gutenberg Bible was printed. And the Gutenberg Bible was used by just about everybody who could now get their mitts on a version of the Bible to distribute all over the world as part of a movement in globalization, but also settler colonialism and also capitalism and also global commercial systems, right? And so the beginning of modernity is very much tied to that technology because of the way that it was used by people in their communities, the way that, the Bible was distributed. Now you no longer have to be in a church to receive the word. It can be deployed on the street corner. And I think about things like, and so this, I think I think about things like broadsheets, the printing
Yeah.
press, printing these broadsheets, and you'd get the kids going out in East London, in the late 19th century and reading these broadsheets, and they're reading these sensational folkloristic stories of the murder ballads and a lot of American folk music, blues music, R&B, bluegrass. Nick Cave, I just saw him play, comes from these murder ballads that are enabled by the printing press, because again, you take it from that digital form or that media form back into the verbal and creative space. And so I think our instincts as humans are to still gonna be to fuck with the technology and make something meaningful
Right.
out of it. I think we have a strong drive toward living meaningful lives. I have to hang on to that.
I'm glad you have it. Yeah. I think there's an aspect of what I was trying to say, and again, I still am not articulating this well because I'm thinking of it as I'm speaking about it.
Go,
And
Matthew.
and there's I'm now trying to not correct myself, but there was a bit of nuance that I lost in my explanation.
Yeah.
Again, I still might be wrong.
Say it. Yeah.
That, when I said push, I meant like it was the people who had the money who could control the message that was pushed. And yes, people then took that message and did what they wanted with it. But initially it was, here's this Bible, which has very specific cultural connotations around control and guidance, but in my mind, control, where the message that was being delivered was an attempt to control what the conversation was. And I feel like the AI stuff is starting to, I don't think it fully does flip it, but I feel like it starts to flip it a bit more, where the message can be anything. I mean, we're still limited with text and video and images and in that sense of like the medium is the message kind of thing. But, it's, I don't know. I'll let it go. But it's
I
just
hear what
such
you're
a
saying.
weird. I don't know how to. I don't know yet fully how to articulate what I mean by it, or even if it's worth saying anything about. But apparently, I just spent 20 minutes doing so. So
I think we're doing what people do when they play with technology. Is just like, let's get in there and like pull some threads and work to think to each other and with each other and experiment together and see like what kinds of agency do I have when I use this tool? What kinds of agency does someone else have? Like what kind of possibility does it entail? Because I'm telling you, like going out, first of all, my first book was about young people in Mississippi using tools like auto-tune, and this is in the very early aughts, to auto-tune, which everyone was complaining about. It's taking the soul out of music, and watching young people who grew up at the crossroads, exactly where the movie Sinners was written about. It was filmed elsewhere, but at the crossroads of Clarksdale, Mississippi, watching young people make hip hop music using these discarded digital technologies that brought all this depth. Mm-hmm. They used it in a blues way, right? And those of us who are, I think we call it Swinging the Machine, I think is the name of the book, about how technologies are used by a lot of folk communities and revolutionary communities and resistant communities in off-label ways that really empower them. Mm-hmm. So, being in Senegal, doing this work in West Africa at the time when social networking sites were introduced, my dissertation argument is people in these areas are incredibly adept at making technologies work for them. You can see it in the Nigerian prince scam, which is not right. The young people I was working with were making incredible art and doing really wonderful things with technology, but there are all sorts of ways to play in that space. And I guess I just focus on the playing. But part of that is also taking a very critical eye and saying, man, as we continue to play, these technologies become more and more restrictive, and we have less and less agency in them than we ever have before. And there is an arc there, Matthew. And it's really hard to talk about while we're still maintaining this possibility, and to say, yeah, well, there's a consolidation happening that makes that agency or that play less and less likely. And that feels very concerning.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
let's
it is concerning.
have more hackathons.
More hackathons. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think about MySpace. Remember MySpace?
Yeah.
Okay. So, it was like pretty straightforward. It did a couple things. We thought it was kind of cool. I was a little bored with it, like almost immediately. I was DJing at the time and I would use it to promote events,
Mm-hmm.
I had other friends who were into it more, and they were learning to code through it. People who wouldn't have had access to code. So a lot of our non-traditional coders came through learning, code through MySpace. But do you remember when it got blinged out? Blinged out MySpace.
Like when you could start changing your background and stuff like that? Or what do you
Yes.
mean?
And when it became a trend to not just change the background, but you go on somebody's MySpace page and it would start blaring music out of your laptop.
Yeah.
And it would be these like flashing lights. And they were like, and then it became baked into clothing. And then it became part of the auto-tune Southern hip hop aesthetic of the time. And it was this total revolution in global approaches to design. And that was coming largely from young Black people in the city and in the US South and all over the world who were using this Silicon Valley technology to advance aesthetics that were meaningful to them. And there was a digital white flight, right? When MySpace was like, the advertisers were like, I don't know what's going on here. This is really messy. And so the platform didn't really persist. It's still there. But boy, did that design potential completely take off. And it brought a lot of important new designers and curators and artists and musicians into resources that they didn't have access to before that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the ability to see what other people are doing, be inspired by that, do your own thing, share that network effect of that. I think it must have been something I've experienced, but I don't really have a memory of ever really experiencing anything like that myself. It's weird. I think it's probably because I tend to only dip my toes into these things. Yeah, that's the wistful, nostalgic, I wish I had that experience moment. But that's okay.
I mean, the printing press.
And maybe I have had that moment. I just
I'm thinking that
realize
because I'm seeing the artwork behind you, and I'm thinking about your book and your writing.
Mm-hmm.
That was put out on a printing press. You think about James Joyce's Ulysses, or Octavia Butler.
Mm-hmm.
Or Zora Neale Hurston, for goodness sake. Like, how did they use the printing press? How might AI be used there? And so I think there's like so much hope in asking who's already using AI in off-label ways to do things that are not necessarily subversive, but are not what they're meant for. Those are the real innovators.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a shit about Gutenberg. I care about James Joyce. I care about, I care about emerging philosophers in Durham, North Carolina, or in Berlin, or in Seoul. So I think we, particularly designers, have the impulse to push these technologies into things they're not supposed to do, and to pay attention when other people are doing it, and to amplify that and to bring resources to it.
Yeah.
Have you seen anybody doing something with AI that makes you really excited and hopeful?
Other than some healthcare applications, not really. I think that, so like the first year that I published books, I did two, And one was a picture book that I used Dolly to generate the images for.
Whoa.
And so that was 2022, right? Yeah. And, I'm now where my thinking is at, like, I at some point want to partner with a person to redo the art for that, because
Mm.
I'm not comfortable. I understand, not more. My perspective has changed to where I just don't feel comfortable having done that. And I can, to some extent, fix what I feel is like a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it felt really great because I could see a project in my head. I could do it, implement it, put it out there. And I didn't need to collaborate with anybody else, even though, anyway, I'm going to leave the nuance to a side for a second.
Okay.
I didn't need to collaborate with anybody else. I didn't need to work on someone else's timeline. I could just describe what I needed. It would get it wrong. I would describe it again. It would get it a little bit better. I would describe it again. That's good enough.
Yeah.
Or that's great, whatever. But like the images that I published in the book are like, yes, this is what I want to see. And I was able to make it and put it out there. But that was, I think, I'm sure there were some people putting out books with AI in it at the time, but it was still early, and I was doing something, again, setting the nuance aside, I was doing something artistic and putting it out there
Yeah.
and getting feedback from people. And so I did like that, bringing the nuance back. Like, I was working with other people.
Yeah.
Just people that I didn't know whose content had been stolen to train the model, right?
Yeah, touche, totally.
So, and that's why I'm not, now that I truly understand more what's going on, like, why I'm not comfortable with that. So
we are definitely in our getting burned phase of fire adoption.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're definitely in our like knocking folks over the head with a Bible phase of our adoption of the printing press. And I look forward to watching some of these alternative models for engaging with these systems start to emerge. I gotta just hold on to that hope. And when it means for me watching entrepreneurs who never had access to coding, affordable coding resources before, making really cool stuff for populations who really are underserved by Silicon Valley. I mean, it buoys me. I think it's cool. So let's it would be fun to have a salon about this sometime, or like have a conversation about what are some of the ways we can apply the theories of media and technology and innovation to what we do in UX, or what we do in product development or the innovation space. Yeah. So we can start to identify opportunities to fuck with it, to do things differently, flip the script.
Okay. More of that, please.
Yeah. Well, let's do it over coffee next time.
Okay. Well, hold on. We're not done yet. And I need to mute for a second.
Sure.
So we're going to switch gears.
Okay.
And it's time for 7 plus or minus 2 questions.
Okay.
I think only UX people find it funny.
I totally get it.
Yeah. All right. So the first question is, what is something that you did recently that went really well?
Something I did recently that went really well. I took a major pivot with my own company, Maaxa Labs, and started working with early stage entrepreneurs, and it hit. It hit shockingly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I'm proud of it. I use my own methods. Talked to people. I understood the market. I talked to something like 156 people in the startup ecosystem at the beginning
Mhm.
of this year. And it didn't take long before I could pull a signal out of it. And it was spot on.
Wait, you did research? What?
Yeah,
No, I'm
I
just
did
kidding.
research on
Yeah.
my own
Yeah.
company. Yes, it works. I'm a believer.
All right. Question number two. What do you wish people cared more about?
I wish people cared more about kids, period. I have one. I really like him. I really like his friends. And I see how distant they are from the resources that would make them as secure and happy as they could be.
Mhm.
And I do a lot of work and a lot of critical thinking to try to meet him where he is when the world leaves a lot of gaps.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Question number three. When you have the opportunity to share food with people, what's your go-to dish?
I cook for people a lot. I do a lot of potlucks. I do paella for Christmas every year. I do a giant paella and tapas.
Mhm.
And that's my favorite go to for Friendsmas, I should say, every year. And so I just spend like Christmas Eve and Friendsmas Day and sometimes even Boxing Day just cooking giant Spanish feast because I spent some time in southern Spain and could just be there for the rest of my life. So that's good. Everybody loves a paella.
What's your paella?
I usually do a vegan version of it because I have lots of friends who are vegan.
Mhm.
But the main paella I make is a little bit of everything. It's like a true,
True
shepherd's.
paella. Yeah.
It's like it's got seafood in it, but it's also I've never used rabbit, but it does have like I tend to use beef broth and I use
Mhm.
chicken in it for the fat, so chicken thighs too. So it's a more traditional paella.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you want some? I'll invite you to the next one.
Yeah, I haven't had paella since like 1991.
Oh my
So,
God, come over.
yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I get the succotat right, and sometimes I can't get it. That's that crystallized, yummy
Mhm.
rice at the bottom. So, but it's good anyway. I'd say
Yeah.
it's like a 70-30. So I can continuous improvement is my goal there.
As with all things. All right. Uh, fourth question. What's the business value of empathy?
Product market fit. You can't make a product. I mean, empathy can mean lots of different things. Sometimes it is a feeling that we have, but it's also data. It's
Mhm.
also data about what other people experience. So empathy means attunement. Empathy leads to the impulse to empathy or the comportment, the mm, you know, the tool of empathy becomes the action of attunement, which becomes the result of fit, of meeting someone where they are. And
Mhm.
so empathy doesn't feel the same to us as people. We don't all approach empathy the same way. We don't all leverage it the same way. And often when I'm a very empathic person, but often when I encounter other people, I'm going like, are they not paying attention to what else is going on around them or how other people feel? I realize that I'm very attuned to individuals on a
Mhm.
one-to-one basis. and that some people are thinking about systems and the outcomes of those systems and trying to be empathic about what the ultimate outcomes of those systems are. And so I try to be as holistic and empathic thinker as possible. So I think there's a diversity of ways to leverage that empathy toward the same goal, which is attuning tools or solutions to the people we're trying to deliver them to. And if businesses don't have that, I mean, that is documented as the reason that at least 3/4 of startups fail. Mm-hmm. Up to that, number we always hear about 91, 92%, that you might make something very interesting, but if it doesn't meet what the market needs or what you can show the market it could have, then it's going to fail. Pure failure.
Yeah. It reminds me of this quote from, again, I can't remember, but I was at like a usability professionals association, they're now UXPA, whatever, conference in like 2003, maybe somewhere around there. And somebody had a button on their jacket that said, if the user can't find it, the feature doesn't exist.
Yeah. Love
and
it.
It's that kind of thing. It's like, it's just like, I don't need this. I don't want this. Like, that's cool, but it's not for me. And not having done the due diligence to see if, to your point, is there a market for this? Does anyone care beyond me? Yeah. So
okay. I see a lot of like really well-motivated people burn their savings out by not empathy doesn't mean having benevolent feelings toward others' needs. Empathy means you are using evidence to understand their actual needs. Right? There's a difference between being a good person and being an empathic person. Often they go together, but you need tools to achieve the latter. Right? So, don't fail fast. Yeah, do fail fast by checking in, man, and getting that bad news and then being ready to pivot. That's what life's all about. That's how innovation works. You have to be absolutely attending to and attuned toward your users and your market if you're going to do that well.
Okay.
I have empathy for founders who don't realize that they need to do that research, or who don't know how to access it because it's too far out of their price point or wheelhouse. And that's exactly why I'm working way more hours than I should be trying to deliver this stuff to right size it for founders who really actually really need it and will actually act on it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Penultimate question. Waving at flaggers, yes or no?
Absolutely. I wave at everybody. Have we not lived in the U.S. South? Man.
Have you lived in Portland?
Yeah, I have. Midwest, two fingers. Every single person you see driving down that road, two fingers. Hey, it is rude if you don't. And flaggers, absolutely. Like a thumbs up or like, hey, like I give them a good, and they don't have to respond. It doesn't hurt my feelings if they don't, but I just want them to know you're standing in the middle of traffic and I'm not going to run your toes over. And thank you for doing hard work. But in Portland, I drive a 1985 Volvo 240 wagon. It's a manual. Makes me really happy.
Awesome.
And Volvo drivers, we're just like, when we at the start, we're like, hey, you're hot.
I'm glad that you have that experience. So I have a C30.
Oh, okay.
And when I think how long I've had it for 15 years, I've had two other C30 people way back. I just like, if I'm driving a Volkswagen, everybody says hi. Volvos, like older Volvos, people will nod and stuff like that. But like C30, I always thought it's such a unique car in the Volvo lineup and there are so many of them here in Portland, but like people I haven't had that experience. So I'm glad you have it. So,
I try to be a member of as many clubs that'll get me a special wave from somebody as possible.
okay.
That's
That's fair.
cool.
That's fair. All
Yeah.
right. Last question. Imagine it's a year from now.
Okay.
What do you hope to not be carrying anymore?
Oh shit. My friend Gary Hirsch made me this. Here, let me see if I can get it. Hi, everybody. This is me in my office. He made me this piece of art, Stability in Fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary Hirsch of On Your Feet here in Portland. It's a consultancy and agency that does really amazing workshops and events and thought leadership and just like being awesome people. And he's also an artist. And I just love the idea of like being able to not go with the flow and some sort of like offhanded gesture, but to really lean into my skills of resilience and make do and improvisation and connection and reconnection, assessment and discernment to ride these waves of profound transformation that are terrifying and to make a meaningful life amidst them and to feel the stability where it needs to be here or with me and my son or me and my chosen community and family. So that I hope not to carry the idea that because I don't have conventional stability, my life wasn't set up that way. And in some ways I do. And I just don't feel, I have a house. It's terrifying. It's so difficult. I'm working class. This is not somewhere I ever thought I'd achieve. But the fear of not having it much longer when I get laid off or whatever, sheer terror. But that I know that I can lean into all of these other skills that I've learned to be able to navigate that and to not just be okay, but to thrive. And to not feel shame about not having that conventional wealth
Mm-hmm.
or whatever that stability looks like. I don't think any of us really have it. So, yeah.
I do not. Yeah. All
What
right.
about you?
What about me? What?
Yeah.
What about me? What?
What about you? Yeah. What do you want to shed for next year?
Oh, fucking hell. Do I only pick one? No.
Yeah. I thought I did.
That was just a joke that I have many things.
I know.
But yeah, I think, so I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say most people about this. But I think most people have a voice in their head that's like, idiot, just some level of criticism that your brain is bringing to bear on whatever you're doing at any given moment. And I think, it's, for some people it's, mess that one up again. And for some people it's, I'm going to shut down completely for 2 weeks because of the shame spiral I'm in. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, that voice in my head, which probably better stated is those neural pathways are so well trod mm-hmm. that they come to bear so quickly and immediately. And that's the same thing. So quickly and so loudly.
Yeah.
That it would be nice at some point to get to a point where I've set that aside or at least diminished its impact.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I thank you for sharing that with me. This is a really fun conversation. We got to do it again. I believe in what you're doing. And man, you know how to make connections like nobody I know. And you have such a breadth of cool stuff that you're working on.
If I could complete a full sentence, I'd be really great. But yeah.
I learned a lot, and my brain is worrying around some of these ideas. Like, how does this follow the frameworks that McLuhan gave us, looking back at tens of thousands of
Mm-hmm.
years of human development, and what is different about this one in particular. And that is, I can sit here all day and be very comfortable with my grooves around applying these frameworks, but to have you challenge those full sentences or 90% sentences is really valuable to
Yeah.
me. So thank you so much. And I don't know, I think we should keep talking about it.
Cool. All right. Well, for now, let's stop talking.